Good morning everybody, and welcome back to another market analysis. Now this month we've had a few smaller updates that have had a notably big impact on some parts of the economy this month. From more notable things like the drop rate for Nex getting buffed, to other updates like Guardians of the Rift and the upcoming Rage 3. There's a lot going on right now in the old school RuneScape economy. So today let's take a few minutes to have a look at what's going on this month and where I think it's going in the future. I hope you guys enjoy. As always, if you do, always appreciate a like in the video. Anyway, let's get started. Now, one item we definitely have to talk about is the Zaryte crossbow. This has been one of the more volatile items in the last couple of months. It is, of course, a Nex drop, and for quite some time it was not only holding its value, but actually increasing, and it was holding fairly steady at around 500 to 550 mil for quite a few months. However, just a few weeks ago on March 29th, they actually changed the drop rate for Nex. They made all of the uniques significantly more common, going from a 1 out of 53 drop rate to a 1 out of 43. Now, at the time, not too much happened. There was a pretty significant crash during that day, but the items quickly recovered right back to what they were worth before. So was that dip an overreaction? Well, I guess not. Because the Zaryte crossbow in particular started to go down and has now plummeted as of a couple days ago, going from a pretty steady price of 550 mil down to now about 390 mil, so actually under 400, and has lost over 100 mil in value just this week, which is really significant. Now, the price of the Zaryte crossbow in particular is very precarious, and that's because right now the Zaryte crossbow does not have pretty much any uses outside of Nex, so it is 100% dependent on the current meta for killing Nex and the volume of drops coming into the game. And if any of that changes, the price will change really quickly as well, because like I said, Nex is his one main use case. So while it did take a couple weeks for the change to completely register, now it's in a bit of a free fall. And it's not just the crossbow as well, pretty much all the other uniques have really started to lose value now. Here we have the Van Braces, which have gone from around 215 mil down to 180 mil. And Torva has gone down quite a bit as well. The plate body has gone from 540 mil down to 430, so 100 mil less there. The plate legs have lost roughly 100 mil as well, and the full helm has crashed quite a bit as well, going from around 300 mil down to 215. So all of the items have lost a tremendous amount of value in the last couple of weeks, and I don't really expect them to gain them again. Ever since the release of Nex, the value of these items really haven't crashed much. If anything, they've actually gone up. And it seems like eventually we were due a correction, but thanks to the actual drop rate change, that has made the items more common, and because they're more common, I think the amount of people actually doing the content has also gone up, as it's more appealing when, well, you know, you're getting drops more often, and those two main factors I think are really going to continue to push the price down. Now on the flip side, we've had a few items increase quite quickly in price. The first one we have is the Faerell Scepter. It's up to nearly 5 mil right now, which is kind of insane for what it is. We can see here, especially in like the last day, if we look at the volume traded, there's big spikes of people buying a significant amount of Scepters. And if you look at the last month, they've gone from around 3.7 mil up to now 5 mil. Now this is eventually going to be due to Rage 3 because it will offer a direct teleport to the Tombs of Masked. Now why it's shooting up right now, I can't say for sure, but if I were to make an absolute guess, I would assume it's because Beneath Cursed Sands, the quest is coming out next week, and even though that's not the raid and the Scepter might not even be used in the quest at all, I think it has still managed to spark some demand for this item. We also have the Arcane Spirit Shield, which is also trending upwards this week, and I think that also could be affected simply by the quest coming out. Even though we have no idea yet when the raid is coming out, I think there might be some assumption that, well, the quest is done, so the raid should be close to follow. No idea if that's going to be the case or not, but I think that could still be pushing the price of these items upwards. Now, I think most people would agree that the RuneScape market, specifically PVM related items, is very hot right now. The vast majority of items have been trending upwards, and the higher end ones is no different. Taking a look at the Twisted Bow here, it is now up to 1.1 bill once again. It has nearly recovered from its year-long dip, I would say, maybe even longer than that. If you look back at the all-time view here is the gigantic dip that started around February of 2021. It bottomed out at 700 mil, something like that, and now it's right back up to 1.1 bill again. So a pretty hefty recovery on that. Now it does seem that with pretty much any new content, Twistabo has a place there. At Nex, the Twistabo is useful. At Raids 1, the Twistabo incredibly useful. For an item that was meant to have a more niche use, it is pretty heavily used in the vast majority of content, and I think Raids 3 is viewed as not being an exception to that rule, and probably why the item has trended up so much recently. And pretty much across the board, most armor pieces have been going up. Now what's really interesting about that is while stuff like Armadil, Ancestral, Bando, stuff like that is probably what most people envision using at the new raid, it's also had a pretty significant effect on cheaper items as well. If you look at Carols, I mean, Carols is up 50-60%. Arims have quietly kind of gone up to about 5 mil each at its peak. A really interesting one, although I'm not sure it's related, is Dharoks. Dharoks is actually at one of the highest points it's ever been at. It peaked at nearly 5 mil this month, and if we look back at the all-time view, yeah, I mean, it's almost never been this price ever in the history of old school. I gotta say, I don't really have an answer for that. I'm not really sure where people Dharok that much. It could be PvP related because I don't really know where people Dharok that much in PvM, unless the giant mole is absolutely popping off right now, but I doubt it. Now, another really interesting thing that happened this week is actually 2 steel bars. The price of steel bars have been extremely volatile this week, going from 400 GP up to 550 up to 600, which is a pretty massive fluctuation for an item like this. Now, the reason for this particular fluctuation has to do with the new Giants Foundry dev blog. In the blog, they mention a new item you can get, which would allow you to make 8 cannonballs at once, which is doubling your production, and would definitely increase the demand for steel bars. Now, whether that will actually have a significant impact or not, it's hard to say. The volume for steel bars is just incredibly high, so it would take a lot to really change that, but even now we can say that it definitely has had an impact. Okay, so another item I've been tracking this month is the Ring of the Elements. Now, it came out pretty recently with Guardians of the Rift, and I was kind of curious what the price would kind of settle at, and well, it looks like the minigame is very popular and the price has continued to tank. Ever since its release, it has just continued to crash, and it's kind of understandable why. It's a pretty easy item to get. You get it just from doing a pretty fun minigame that people are doing anyway, and probably the most damning part of all is once you have managed to afford all of the items in the minigame shop and you start to stack up excess Abyssal Pearls, there's not really much for you to spend it on except for the Ring of the Elements, which means once you've afforded all the recolors, you've bought all the pieces of the skilling outfit, maybe you've even gotten the transmog for your pet, after then, all of the additional pearls are going to be going to just buying these rings. I think that's really why they've crashed so much so quickly. Now, speaking of Guardians of the Rift, one question I had pretty much right after the release is, how is this going to affect the price of runes? Because not only is the minigame producing runes on its own, but it also provides a skilling outfit which increases the amount of runes you get by 60%, which is a significant amount. Well, if we look at the last month for certain items, it actually doesn't look that bad. Now, first up here we have Blood Runes, which granted did crash a bit, but so far is totally recovered in price and might actually be a little bit higher than before, which is kind of interesting. Next up here we have the Astral Rune, which was worth around 150 before the minigame. Now it's worth around 130, so it has fallen a bit, but not nearly as much as I had anticipated. Here we have the Nature Rune, which went from around 200 GP at the time to 177. Sure, it's gone down a bit. Death Runes went from 200 down to 190 or something like that, and we have Law Runes, which went from 145 down to 130. Oh yeah, and Mud Runes, which I thought would be greatly affected, maybe are affected the most, but I mean, they're worth the same amount they were worth 4 months ago, so really, were they affected that much? As a general rule of thumb, it looks like most of them crashed by about 10%, which isn't really that much. Now, I think a pretty large factor as to why it didn't actually crash very much is due to the fact that a lot of runes don't actually come from rune crafting. Tons of them come from PVM drops, tons of them just come from shops. So the increase in rune production is only a small segment of where all of those runes are coming from, and nothing else changed. So sure, things crashed by about 10%, but now rune crafting is a very profitable skill once again, and Ironman and stuff like that can get larger amounts of runes, so overall, I still think it was a positive, even if runes crashed by about 10 or 15%. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Now, before I go here, I want to give a giant thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. Thank you so much to Nello, Alejandra, The Hybrid, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed to the Dragon tier. Really, I appreciate it so much. Also, a giant thank you to Kaitin987, Mexos, Base Titch, MDM001, and YoYoSub89 for being subscribed to the Rune tier. Appreciate you guys as well. As always, if anyone's looking for a direct way to support me, YouTube membership is the best way to do so. You'll get immortalized in all of my future videos, you can get a custom role on my Discord server, and you'll even know when all my videos are coming out. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.